Hello, my name is Gary Nicolaisen. This is speech number 4, Persuasive Speech. I'm here to talk to you today about a right that we all have. This right was not easily attained. It was fought for, struggled for, and people often died for it. And it took decades, sometimes centuries, for certain people to achieve it. What am I talking about? Well, that is the right to vote. That is what I am here to persuade you that every person who qualifies and is able to should go out and exercise their right to vote. One, is because it honors the sacrifices made by all those people that came before us. Two, it is part of your civic duty to be part of your community to get out and vote. And three is it expresses your views and it gives you representation in the future of our nation. First off, I'm going to be discussing mainly the history of voting and we should consider it a right because it was so hard fought for and it took so many years. The first election was in 1780, and in that election, George Washington was elected president by the founding fathers. The founding fathers chose to start the American Revolution, and one of the rallying cries of that was no taxation without representation. This basically stated that they wanted a say in their government and how it was run and how their lives were ran on a daily basis. In that first election, 10 of the 13 states sent electors and unanimously voted George Washington as the first president of the United States. The next group who were denied their voting rights would be African Americans. Their voting history starts with the passage of the 15th Amendment. This was information found on history.com, article written by their editors, which is in my bibliography. The 15th Amendment was adopted in 1870. This gave all African Americans who were recently freed after the Civil War the right to vote. But despite this amendment, there was many discriminating practices, especially in the South, that still tried to deny their right to vote through other things such as poll taxes and literacy tests. Due to this, even though the amendment said they could vote, it still was a long struggle before they began to have full voting rights. And this was finally achieved in 1965 with the passing of the Voting Rights Act, signed into law by President Lyndon B. Johnson. And this was a culmination and a buildup of a lot of the actions of the civil rights movement done by Martin Luther King Jr. and all the marches and protests that he initiated. And this voting act finally eliminated those poll taxes, literacy tests, and other legal barriers that were trying to deny African Americans their voting rights. A third group or demographic which struggled hard and fought for their voting rights would be that of women. The women's suffrage movement, which is their movement attempting to gain the right to vote, began nationally at the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848. This was led and organized by Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott, two pillars of the women's suffrage movement. This was the first time they all became organized and created a national platform to try and achieve women's voting rights on a national level. Other famous names that would join the struggle would be Susan B. Anthony later. And this all culminated in the 19th Amendment, which was ratified on August 18th, 1920. And this legally gave women the right to vote on a national level. So, looking back, just to briefly touch on what I've discussed on, voting is a privilege that was, one, not given to us. Many people sacrificed and fought hard to achieve this privilege, whether it be the founding fathers, African Americans, and women. And it took years, it took decades, it took centuries in some cases for these groups to achieve this right. And that is why we should not take it for granted. We should go out and exercise our right to vote, as it is our civic duty, and it expresses how we feel about how our nation shall be ran. And I just want to thank you all for being part of this speech, and have a great day. Aloha.